Hello and welcome to the ORH Podcast. As always, you're joined by myself, Finley and Adam Driscoll, as we talk all things Luton Town. And we're going to be talking about Jack Wilshere's first game as Luton manager. And it didn't get off to the start we were hoping for or expecting with our predictions from last week. But before that, Adam, how are you doing?
I'm okay, mate. As you said, I think we spent a lot of last week with a lot of positivity and genuine excitement ahead of a big game on Saturday. But as you've said, we've changed a lot. We've changed the squad. We've changed the manager, and the one thing that hasn't changed is the performances that we're seeing, and obviously the results as well. So we'll get into all of that, over the next sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. But it's just a very difficult position that we're all in at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all a bit, guess you could say, up in the air in terms of what we're seeing on the pitch with sort of the lack of consistency, the lack of performances. We are actually pretty consistent. We're pretty consistently poor in our results. There's a couple of players that I thought were positive, particularly in the second half, a couple of the subs as well. And we'll talk all about that later on in the episode. So keep listening for that in the second half of this. But we are going to be talking all about the 2-0 defeat at home to Mansfield, obviously from Saturday, which was it was a poor day all round for Luton. It started off, as you mentioned, so optimistic. Wilshere got the proper sort of welcome to the club, who came out the tunnel a bit later. ITV Sport were doing their featured game there. I think there was a lot more media there than we've seen for the last few games as well. And it felt really, really optimistic before the game. Everyone you spoke to seemed really, I guess excited is probably what the correct word to use to describe how people were feeling ahead of the game. I think it given a new sort of lease of life to people to go to the football, myself included. I was actually looking forward to going to the game. I took my mum to the game, and I don't think she appreciated that decision from me, but I'm sure I can discuss that privately. But yeah, it looked fairly promising from in the early stages, I guess you could say. We seemed to have a bit more control of the game in possession in those early, probably I guess 30 minutes or so. It was pretty positive the way we were playing. We were keeping hold of the ball. We were moving it around a bit more. We had players actually making some runs. There was movement, which is something we've not seen a lot of recently. And then obviously Jordan Clark was brought down for the penalty, which Nahki Wells stepped up to take. And it was a poor penalty, and it was also a good save. And as soon as that penalty was missed, you felt the energy in the stadium get sucked out of it straight away. And you could see the confidence on the pitch across the board, really, apart from Clicker, who was once again our best player, without a shadow of a doubt. But the confidence was just sucked out of the players.
Yeah, it absolutely was, wasn't it? I mean, there's a reason I said Jordan Clark would be our player of the season, because he's just so dependable and reliable, and I stand by that 100%. He will be our player of the season. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's easy to say, but football is all about big moments, and there were big moments in that game that didn't go for us, and we're a fragile bunch. Um, we saw a couple of weeks ago at Stevenage a really scrappy first half. We missed a couple of very good chances. As soon as Stevenage scored, heads were down. Confidence is anything that's been built up during the game is gone, and there were massive moments in the game against Mansfield as well on Saturday. I mean, Jordan Clark hit the post. If that hits the inside of the post and goes in, this is a different game we're speaking about. Ironically, we had a couple of really good passages of play in attacking senses. One of those led to the penalty. I think, was it Clark again that got fouled for the penalty? So, as I say, like, instrumental really. But when you get a penalty and you don't score it, and you're as fragile as we are, not only is that detrimental to us in that sense, but it just gives your opponents another massive opportunity to stay in the game. I thought the Doncaster penalty that Wells missed, I thought was more a good save. I would say it was more of a kind of 70-30 in favour of the keeper. I think that this was a poor penalty. He's kept it low and tried to leather it, but he's not put it in anywhere near the corner, and that's the problem. Like it looks like a great penalty if the keeper dives to his left, but when he guesses right and he's still fairly central, um, it doesn't come across as a great penalty. And I was a little bit surprised, I have to say, that he took it, given that he missed that one against Doncaster. We had another one since, and Kajua took that at Blackpool. Um, and obviously Wells picks up the ball for this one, so it did confuse me a little bit. Um, in my mind, I just think, who is your most reliable player? Ours is Jordan Clark. For me, he just give him penalties, because I'd put my mortgage on him scoring, and with the confidence of some other players in our team right now, I couldn't say the same about a lot of them for that pressure situation.
It is really frustrating when we've gone from having someone on penalties like Colton Morris for a few years, and he just didn't miss them. Even when I remember Newcastle away, he obviously took the penalty, but took it too early, but scored it. Was made to
Yeah,
retake it, scored it again, and you could just whenever he stepped up for a penalty, you could tell he most likely wasn't going to miss. And now it doesn't seem like we've got a real sort of assigned penalty taker at the moment. It doesn't feel like there's someone who is going to step up every time with the confidence to think, I'm going to take this and I'm going to score it. And it is, yeah, it's quite concerning in terms of, because we are getting a lot of penalties as well. If you look at some of the numbers surrounding penalties, we are really, really high up there. So Kadura alone has had 2 penalties already this season. Um, but we've been awarded, I believe, more than anyone else. Yeah, we've been
mm,
awarded 5 penalties already this season, which
yeah,
is the highest in the division. But yeah, we've scored. What have we missed? Two, missed three.
yeah. And we got one against Barnet as well, didn't we, in the cup?
Yeah,
So we're getting them. I think primarily that situation, that scenario, is summed up by our position with our forwards. We don't have a consistent starting forward. We don't have any of them that are showing that much confidence right now. And traditionally, your penalties are going to be taken by a centre forward. So that for me, they kind of go hand in hand. We aren't free flowing in attack. We're not scoring a load of goals. We don't have a striker that is leading us and saying, "Get me the ball, I'll score." And we get those breaks with penalties, and we're really hit and miss as to whether they go in. So yeah, I think for me that kind of goes hand in hand, really.
and after that missed penalty, Mansfield went up the other end and scored. What 5 or 6 minutes later through Reece Oates, and it was. I felt really bad for him, but it was Wells again who made the mistake that led to the goal. He sort of tried to pass back. He went for quite an ambitious back pass, like through the whole midfield, and sort of misjudged where Naismith was moving, and yeah, it was picked up by a Mansfield player. Reece Oates had an effort from the edge of the box, and it was a really, really good finish. I don't think we shouldn't take it away from him for how good of a finish that was, sort of curling into that top corner area. And Kelly was never going to get anywhere near it. I don't think many keepers would have probably stopped that. But how many times have we seen really, really good, high quality goals scored against us because we're giving away the ball in those sorts of areas, and then the players are able to have a
Mm.
crack from range and curl it in, and it's very frustrating.
Of course it is, and Wilshere and Co will look at that, and yes, they'll look at it and go, "What a finish!" I mean, if Clark goes in earlier on, as we were talking about, it's a similar sort of thing, isn't it? But they'll also be looking at, where have we given the ball away, and why have we given the ball away? Because it's not just the fact we have given the ball away; it's analysing why that pass was made. You know, because it's not a forward pass, is it? It's certainly a backwards pass, and you've got players there that aren't on the same wavelength in that scenario. So you have to look at it from a detailed perspective and understand why we were even playing that pass. Where is the movement from other players to give Wells in that situation more options? So there's obviously a lot wrong with how it's come about, but you have to say fair play to Oates, because that was quite a brilliant finish that, as you say, not many keepers are going to be stopping.
Yeah, that apart from that goal, the first half was fairly promising at times, as I've mentioned, and I was just looking at some of the stats, and I thought we had a fair few efforts on goal, and in the first half we actually had 10 shots, 4 on target, which I guess isn't the best sort of underlying numbers, but we did have just over 2 xg, which again I know a lot of people aren't big stats fans, but it does sort of show that there is some output on the pitch, that we are getting into positions to have those efforts on goal. We actually had less possession in the first half than the second half, but that's because Mansfield were able to just sit off us and allow us to have the ball and just move it around, not really doing anything. But if Wells penalty goes in, it's a completely different game at that stage. And I actually came over to you and chatted to you at half time about that. And we said the same thing. We said if we score that and go 1-0 up, the game is completely different. It's in our hands. They will have to come at us, and we probably get the opportunity to score again.
Yeah, and I do genuinely think that confidence works both ways. You know, if we score the penalty and we're 1-0 up with 10 minutes of the first half to go, I think we carry on being front-footed for at least the rest of the first half. You know, Mansfield have to potentially change their approach a little bit. I don't think they were there for the draw, but they'd sort of conceded possession in a sense, and they would have had to be a bit more proactive in getting on the ball and making more chances for themselves. So again, it's not just about going 1-0 up. It's how you take chances and how you impact your own team, your own confidence, and then what the opposition have to do as well. Now, obviously, at the moment, it feels like everything is going against us, and we have to somehow get through this period. I mean, in the last fortnight, we've lost to Stevenage, Cambridge, and Mansfield, so you could be forgiven for thinking we were back in the first couple of seasons of the conference. You know, it genuinely has those sort of vibes about it, doesn't it? But we just have to find a way of getting through this tough time. Um, and as frustrating as it is, if we as supporters need to accept that we've changed the manager, he needs time, he needs to build a project. If we have to accept that this season is going to be, can we somehow get a top 6 playoff place? And if we don't, then it's going to be a tough one to swallow. But it does feel like it's shaping more and more towards that, you know, with every passing week.
Well, our last sort of playoff experience was pretty fun, so I guess we've got that to look forward to if we do manage to turn things around and sort of make a steady chug up the table. Obviously, we sit 14th at the moment, so doesn't feel like that's it doesn't feel like that's realistic at the moment, but it obviously is. Things can change really quickly in any league, but I feel like the EFL in particular, we sort of things move around so much in throughout the season. We're only 12 games in, so we've got plenty of time left, but we do need things to start clicking pretty quickly. Um, if obviously anyone who was watching the game would have seen that, I think Mansfield just looked more settled in how they were playing, which is expected. They've had Nigel Clough there for 6 years now, and he's got a pretty stable setup of players, a real solid base in Oshilaja and Blake Tracy, and then that midfield in front of them as well, who you didn't really look at them and think there's players in this side who don't know what they need to be doing, who aren't used to what these instructions are. And it's clear that, I mean, a couple of the players in there with the likes of Roberts and Evans and Oates, they've got those players who are willing to try something as well and have a go at changing the game a bit.
Yeah, and I hadn't actually realised that Clough's been there for 6 years, but that makes perfect sense, because you've got a team that are probably at their level. If I mean, they would probably say the same thing. They're happy to be a League One club. Um, but he gets the opportunity and the time to build a squad and build a team around a formation and an identity and a style of play. And I'd be amazed if, like, I mean, by all accounts, it looks very much like they played a 4-2-3-1 on Saturday. I'd be amazed if they hadn't played that for the most part of last season. You've got players that understand their responsibilities in each of those roles. And then when players move on, you just build around the same thing, the same system, and then you add bits of quality. Like as we said, Roberts, um, probably the best player on the pitch on Saturday. So you know they're different scenarios because there's so much pressure on us and expectation. But this is what I mean. Like if if we're treating this as a new project, then I think we're going to have to accept that whatever happens this season happens. You you try and stick with this system. You don't change it as frequently as we have done before, or and you start to really build the foundations up again on the pitch with an identity, and that's all going to take time for Wilshere to get across. Really,
Yeah, it's that word you use there, identity, is quite interesting to think about what we've got at the moment because we have seen so much change on the pitch in terms of the players we're lining up with. I guess actually, if you look at the team that played yesterday, it's apart from Wells, Kadua, and Keeley, it's all players that we had last season, and you think, oh, maybe that's a well, and Savile as well, obviously. But you look
yeah,
at that and you go, maybe this is what we need to do: find the players who already know what the club's about, who've been here a little while now, and know what we're looking for as a fan base in particular. Because once Kenny gets behind the players, it is a really really good place to play football for a Luton side. You would think, but it just feels so precarious at the moment. Sort of when anything goes wrong, it's people are just so fed up of seeing things go badly, and that's completely expected, to be honest. So there is very short patience at the moment, and when people are spending however much money we're spending every week to go and watch the football, get into games, and people are often just going to see people at times, and then the football's just part of that. But it's been so poor on the pitch for ages now, and that's why it's so sort of the fuse is so short.
yeah. Of course, it's every. We're now down to the point where every misplaced pass just it brings the vocal frustration out in supporters, and that's really difficult because we're in a position where we are in a new era now. We've got a manager that everybody I've spoken to says I really think he'll do well and I really want him to succeed. But you've got a group of players that you are at the end of your tether with because of what we've seen last season, what we've seen in the first 12 games this season. You know, it's really counterintuitive. You want to get behind the manager, but you're a bit fed up with some of these players not playing to their ability. So it's a really difficult situation to be in. What we need is we need players to stop getting injured. We need a a much bigger squad of quality than we've got right now to be able to select from, and we need someone to come back in and just spark the place up. Um, we've not seen Izzy Jones, Adebayo, Jacob Brown, like just to name a few, a Doffin. We need someone, one of those type, to come back and really light things up. And you think, right, okay, wow, like this is something to be positive about. But what we're seeing right now is that those guys aren't around, and then every couple of weeks someone else is injured, and it's just that's another thing that is really really mind blowing within the club right now that we have so many injuries, and it seems like every press conference, whoever's in charge has to say this person's picked up a knock, they're going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks. So that again is really really not helping us in our overall scenario.
Yeah, and it's hard to understand where these injuries are coming from at times because a lot of them don't seem to be picked up in games. We're not seeing players go off injured particularly regularly in games, so it's just sort of knocks in training. But we've changed coach, so we've changed training. So like what we've been doing in training, we know we've got a good facility at the Brace in terms of what they're using, where they're training as well. So it is so frustrating. But I think maybe it's because we have got so many players injured that we are relying on the same players to play all constantly. So they are having to put a lot more minutes in than maybe they'd want to in terms of when they're not 100% fit, perhaps, and that's why people are picking up knocks. I don't know, but every club in the league they've got to play the same number of fixtures. We just don't seem to be able to keep players fit, and it's been since the Premier League that's happened. We've got a completely different squad to the Premier League as well. When you look at the team that started yesterday, the only players we had in the Premier League were Mengi, Anderson, and Clark that started, and you think, what has happened in that time for us as a club to just get so many injuries?
Yeah, and Jordan Clark missed the first half of the Premier League season. Anderson missed a massive chunk of it, I think, from memory, and last season. Mengi's had his injury troubles as well. So there's 3 players we listed, but they've all had their long term absence, haven't they? So it's. I mean, look, there's. I'm sure the right things are being done at the club within medical, all the right tests, all the right training structures, everything like that. They're not doing things on purpose. So there is an element of horrendous luck that we're having with injuries. So I'm not going to start blaming anyone in particular, but we need that luck to change big time. We've got to keep players fit for the rest of the season if we're going to be able to do something half decent.
And because of the players we have got unavailable, it's always seems to be one area of the pitch that we have just loads of players injured at the same time. So in the Premier League, it was centre back, where we just didn't have anyone fit there, and now it's full back, and we actually don't have a right back at the moment who is available. We haven't had a right back for most of the season. Um, when you look at who we have in that position at the club, we've got obviously Walters. He's on his way back, I think, from the press conference before the game against Mansfield. It sounds like it'll be about 3 weeks till he's back. And we'll obviously still need time to settle in then. We've got a Dauphin who we obviously haven't seen yet. That was for a different reason, which we aren't really sure what that issue is they found. But it looks like he's back in training now. But again, he'll need time to get to full fitness. Jones can play there as well. He's been obviously unavailable all season. So that's 3 players who could play that right back position who immediately fix that right side problem where Makosa has just been sort of shoehorned in, and he just does not look like a right back at all. He's so out of his depth in that position.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I thought at Stevenage he was dreadful. If I'm being honest, um, like he was getting pulled out of position all over the place. Didn't look like he knew where he was meant to be, and just really not good. And then he's just not comfortable there. And you know, I know that people will say, yeah, but when you play 3 centre halves and he's playing on the right side of the 3, then he's technically a slightly inside right back. But it is a different position, different responsibilities, different mindset. And I just don't think he is a right back. But what do you do when you've got 3 at the club potentially, and they're all not there at the same time? The only thing you do is either address it in the summer window, which we didn't because I think we thought players might be back quicker than they are, um, or you now have to wait until January and see if you can get another right back in. You know what's going to happen in January? We'll have Walters, Izzy Jones, and a Dauphin probably all fit and available for selection. So it's a really difficult position, but yeah, it's certainly not helping our game and any of the formations that we play that we don't have you know natural wing backs or natural fullbacks.
And when you look at that left-hand side as well, we've obviously got Naismith who can play there, but is more natural in that left-hand side of centre back, and it does give us that sort of natural shape because of his left-footedness, and it allows us to set up a bit better. And then I was actually surprised that Bramwell didn't start yesterday. I thought he would give us sort of more natural width on that side, and I thought we did benefit when Ali moved over to the right and was on his strong foot.
Yeah, I think you definitely get more from an attacking perspective at left back with Bramall. I mean, right now for me, the issue I don't have an issue with Naismith playing, whether it's left back or or centre back, but he's just not in form, is he? He looks he looks like one that's lacking confidence, and probably if you ask him the question, he would say that his game's not where he wants it to be. But he's clearly off the pace, and excuse me, he's also our on-pitch captain. So it's difficult because things aren't going right. Someone like him, an experienced player that you think is going to turn up every week and be brilliant, isn't. Um, and it just really sums up the scenario that we're in as a club right now, I think.
Yeah, confidence is a massive issue, I think, and that seems to be where a lot of the issues are stemming from. I think at the moment, it would be interesting to see, as you said, what the players would say about that, whether they agree with that. And I imagine, if they were being honest, there's a few of them that would say that is probably the case. I guess that's where you need some of the players returning from injury, who are completely fresh to the season, to come into the side because they haven't been affected by what's happened so
Yeah,
far.
exactly. And that's what I mean by injuries aren't helping us, because you've got players that aren't able to stay in the team because they're getting injured. You've got a long list of players that seem to have medium to long term injuries that aren't ready to come back and help the squad. Um, and it's exactly that, isn't it? Injuries is so detrimental to us right now, that it doesn't help at all. Now, whether or not we can correct that and we can have everybody primarily available for the second half of the season, we can really start to build something, remains to be seen. But it doesn't. As a supporter, you don't get much hope from that happening because of our recent track record.
Welcome back to the Oak Road Hatter podcast. You're still joined by myself and Adam. We're talking a bit more about the game yesterday, and I just wanted to get your opinion on some of the things that we saw in the second half. So obviously the subs came on, and sort of in the last 15 minutes, I guess we looked, in my opinion, we were slightly more forward thinking, not much more. I'm probably clutching at straws a bit. Ali moved over to the right, which I've not seen him play there for us, but for the first time all game, he started trying to beat players and getting forward and trying to go round players because he wasn't having to cut back inside and try and use his right foot on that left hand side. He was able to use his right foot. It was just that final ball was slightly missing, so he did fire a few crosses across, but there was no one really there to get on the end of them, and they were a bit high for anyone to put the head on. But I thought there was some promise there that we were able to sort of look a bit more positive. And obviously Jordan Clark, as we've mentioned, was actually very good on throughout the game. He did look far better than everyone else, and it is interesting because we discussed confidence, and he's someone who's been with us throughout the Premier League and the Championship last season, and even before the Premier League, obviously as well. But he's been part of the repeated defeats, and he doesn't seem like his confidence is impacted by that. So it's weird to think that the other players around him would be.
Yeah, but I think he's probably the only one of the only players that can walk off the pitch every week thinking I've done my part, or I've played to my ability. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's really the only one that doesn't get or hasn't previously been berated by fans when they've come over at the end of the game. So I've no issue with him whatsoever. I think he's still a gem for us, and if we lose him now, then I hate to think where we might be. Um, but you mentioned there around like the final 15, 20 minutes or so. I thought personally we looked like we were just running out of puff, running out of ideas. Um, I never really felt like we were going to get a goal, and that's yeah. I think that's just the theme of the last few weeks in particular, really.
Yeah, I agree. I did think this doesn't feel like we're going to score at any point here, and I was very much ready to go before it was over. I sort of stuck it out as long as I could bring myself to. So I got into added time and then saw the train times and thought, oh, I'll head off now. Um, but yeah, I didn't miss anything in those 3 or 4 minutes. I was gone for. I heard some boos as I was walking away and thought, yep, nothing's changed then. Um, it is really on a bit of a tipping point now. I think for fans, that is, because of the persistent defeats and the persistent poor performances, people have just lost patience, and that's what you mentioned in the first part. When one misplaced pass happens, people get audibly annoyed, myself included, at games where I'm just sat there going, "Oh." Like, it does feel quite tedious at times, but I am still optimistic about Wilshere and Chris Powell and sort of that setup. I think there is something there, and when we do get players like Adoffin and Jones back, I think there is the potential that once we've got a more balanced side, there is an ability for players to kick on a bit and actually get some confidence.
Yeah, I mean the frustrating thing though for us, I guess, is that we shouldn't have to wait for those players to come back to see balance and see consistencies. But I absolutely agree on what you're saying. Like we just we have to get behind Jack Wilshere. We have to get behind Chris Powell. Really, just see what they can do because it's there's no denying we're in a low point, very much low point for the club right now. So maybe we have to adjust our expectations and just get on board this project and see and see what we can do. And unfortunately, it looks like we have to kind of just suck it up, really.
Yeah, we asked Luton fans on Twitter what 3 things they thought were the main issues from yesterday's defeat. So we're going to discuss some of them now. So I'll just go through some of the comments we got. Loyal Hatter says attitude / lack of fight from players. Players still playing out of position and no leadership. 15 minutes to go. Naismith looked completely fed up waiting for a throw in rather than organising and trying to energise the team for a fight back. And I think that leadership thing is something there. There's something in that. Like, we don't really feel like we've got a core of leaders in the team, sort of in that defence in particular. It's very much broken up areas, and then you've got players like Saville and Clark who are more experienced in midfield, so they can lead by example. But doesn't feel like there's anyone really talking.
Yeah, and you look at our back line on paper and you think Mengi, Naismith, Anderson, being 3 of the 4, all experienced players. I mean, obviously Mengi's still young, but he's still really experienced. And you look at it and think this is formidable. Like this is, if anything, we should have strong foundations at the back. But it's just not working, is it? I think Mengi and Anderson as a partnership is probably not quite right. I think they they have their physicality is there, but there's not the pace. If someone gets in behind or they play a through ball down the middle, and that's our downfall. So yeah, the defense should be a lot better than it is, and I think it may be a case of needing to tweak and find the right partnership, particularly at centre half.
Yeah, Andy Carlisle says basic passing and ball trapping. Too many passes go astray or players can't keep the ball. 2, lack of movement, very static, and at times defenders don't know what to do playing out except sideways. And 3, no one is ever in the middle when we cross. And that is sort of 3 things we've mentioned already. But the one thing I wanted to sort of focus on is that lack of movement. We do feel very, very static, particularly when we have possession somewhere in sort of defence or midfield. There doesn't seem to be many runners for us. Players aren't moving to find space.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a confidence thing. I think players are now playing on eggshells type thing. Like they don't have the confidence in themselves to make the right runs, to be able to make those mistakes as well. Obviously the mistakes are happening, but there's not the confidence in the likes of Millie Ali, or whatever wing he's on. There's not that confidence to think I'm gonna take you on, I'm gonna beat you. So with that, you don't have the fluidity and you don't have the patterns and the movement that we all want to see in our attacking players. And I think that is something that's going to take a little bit of time to appear again.
And another one I wanted to look at was one here. So Steve Richards says, try some of the under-21 team, especially at right back and up front. Even risk some of the signals to try and get something at Northampton. Even play Wilshere for a half to show them how it's done. And obviously he is joking a bit there, but he has a point about some of the under-21 side. They seem to be consistently actually doing really well in the recent games, and I assume we've got a balanced side with players in those positions, and they might not be sort of as good as some other players that we have at the club that are unavailable. But I mean, it would give us a more natural sort of shape if we were playing one of them sort of in that right back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't claim to know the under 21s as much to say who it would be. My first thought was, would it be Chigozie playing right back? But you do begin to wonder, like, if our 21s are doing well, now is a good time to have a look at one or two of them. What have we got to lose? We don't have anything to lose right now, and you never know. But you never quite know that there could be a diamond in there somewhere that really comes in out of nowhere, gives us that spark that I've been talking about, and it might come from a player that we've never heard of or never seen. So I wouldn't rush to throw sort of like 4 or 5 in, but I certainly don't think one or two of our better ones being in the matchday squad would do us any harm at all.
Yeah, it is difficult to see sort of how we can fix it, but I do think there are sort of options there, sort of in the background, and I'm sure Wilshere is very much aware of that, and he'll be looking at all the different possibilities going forward, and we'll be talking about what we can expect going forward in the next episode when we look ahead to the trip to Northampton Town, so just down the road, and we'll be talking about that later on in the week, so don't forget to join us then. But for today's episode, thank you very much for listening to myself and to Adam, and don't forget to subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. We really appreciate all the support on there, and we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. But again, thank you very much for listening to myself and Adam.